Welcome everybody to the Southeast Cyber Resilience Centre's latest podcast, Cyber Inside Out. This month, the Centre has been taking a closer look at the food and retail sector, and I'm pleased to say that I'm joined this week not only by my colleague at the Centre, Chris White, as head of our Cyber and Innovation, but also by Lee Whatford, Chief Security Officer at Dominoes Pizzas UK, and also by Claire Hoole at Circle Insurance Limited. Lee, Chris and Claire, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Justin.
Thank you very much for joining us. So as I said before, this month we've been looking at what cyber resilience, cyber security means to the food and retail sector, and I know that a lot of these messages transcend all of the sectors, but as you're aware, we're trying to sort of push these messages and hopefully get them to land and resonate in what they actually mean to people working in these particular sectors themselves. So just to sort of start us off then, there's a couple of sort of starter questions, if I may. Lee, if I could maybe come to you first off. So from your perspective as security, chief for a very large national retailer, what's your sort of top concerns in relation to cybersecurity and cyber criminals?
Yeah, hi Justin, and afternoon everyone. Yes, so I guess it's ever changing. I think is the nature of what's happening out there. So one thing that we do is we track our threats quite closely, and we monitor sort of trends, and we try and understand not only on behalf of Dominoes, but also working very closely with our franchisee partners who do run sort of small businesses. Exactly what are the biggest concerns, what are the biggest threats, what are the biggest worries, and I think really kind of top of that tree is really ransomware. That's certainly the biggest issue that we all face. It's certainly the one that hits the news most often, and it's certainly and usually the biggest business impacting one as well. Taking down systems, taking down critical services, taking down key suppliers. And really disrupting business with, to view that it's going to cost you money to get your business back. It can be incredibly business impacting. It has actually made businesses go bankrupt over the years. So that's certainly the biggest thing that we're tracing. And another one is it's really around sort of compromise of kind of usernames and passwords. So what we see quite often is that through another breach of another cyber attack, say LinkedIn or a Facebook or somewhere that you'd use your username and password. If you use those same usernames and passwords for some of the business systems, then actually that's putting those business systems at risk as well. So and the threat actors or the hackers are very good at taking a set of usernames and passwords and trying to apply those to other systems, and then accessing illegally those other systems to do whatever. Quite often, perpetuate the same thing. So they're really the two big takeaways at the moment, I think.
So top tip there then, in terms of potentially putting a bit of sterility between your personal persona online and your sort of work persona online.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, there's a few things that can be done. Passwords is really, really important. Unique passwords, not reusing passwords. So there's a load of advice that we have as a centre, which is really simple. Don't reuse passwords. Keep everything unique. Use a password manager where at all possible, and really then to follow up on that and to make it even stronger and even better is really the use of multi-factor authentication, which in a very simple word is where most people use online banking these days, where online banking asks you for not only a password, but it also send you a text message or to use an app on your phone to input a code. To use both of those things together, that's incredibly powerful, and certainly one of the key things that we do, and one of the key things that I would recommend to anybody and everybody, both professionally and personally.
Thanks, Lee. Claire, bringing you into that, if I may. So, representing an insurance company, what are the things that most sort of concern you and Circle Insurance in relation to cyber crime?
From an insurance point of view, the biggest risk that we see from all companies, really, whether it's retail or commercial business, manufacturing, whatever, it's just human error and carelessness of employees. To be honest, that's the biggest risk that we see. So people, say, clicking on a phishing email, sending bank details to the wrong person, accidentally sort of losing or doing something with customer data that they shouldn't have done. That's the biggest risk that we see, and it's something that you can train your employees as much as possible about, but at the end of the day, mistakes do and will happen, and that's the biggest risk that we see as insurers. Also, you've got the big threat of the ransomware as well, and definitely the you've got theft of customer data, malicious insiders, organised crime groups. You've got a lot of threats coming from all directions, really, haven't you? But I think on a day-to-day basis, the maybe careless act of an employee is your biggest risk.
And that's actually that is something that we do hear quite often in the conversations we have with businesses, Chris, isn't it? And it does feature as one of the areas, certainly from the centres. One of the services that we deliver is security training for staff. And I take on board your point, Claire, in terms of you can train your staff, but accidents, if that's the right phrase to use, do happen. But I suppose as a business owner, business leader, it's about mitigating and reducing those instances of when those accidents, human error will occur. We all know that to be. Chris, do you want to add anything in relation to those sort of points from a law enforcement perspective?
I was only having that conversation yesterday with someone that they have put all of the right security controls in place. But unfortunately, the one thing they got was the insider threat. So at the beginning of the onboarding of that member of staff, they were trustworthy and loyal. And for whatever reason, during that employment, the employee went a bit rogue. And because they had enhanced access to some of the computer systems, they prevented the genuine owner of that company having access to certain sensitive parts and then turned off their website. So I guess when you literally give staff access and elevated access to some of your security, rather like, I guess, you trust them with the office keys, don't you? Because they're going to come in early and unlock and turn the alarm off. You need to consider some sort of resilience that you can draw back some of those elevated permissions or privileges, so you can maintain control of your own company. And especially when they leave, you also have the ability that when you recover keys and alarm codes and office laptops and phones, again, you withdraw those permissions.
So part of that will be having an effective onboarding and indeed offboarding in terms of sort of staff turnaround. And it's a really interesting point. And again, something that we continue to sort of preach about, Chris, isn't it? Is that, cyber security training for staff, what does that actually mean to a business? I think there's still this belief that deliver it once, job done, box ticked, move on to the next issue. We're very much advocates of this principle that, each year a business will spend time reaffirming their staff's awareness of such processes as fire alarm and where the exits are and where the fire extinguishers are and the right colour fire extinguisher for the right colour fire, etc. But actually they need to probably start to think about cyber in terms of the same context, because I think, Lee, you made that point really. Your first point was that it constantly changes, and so what was the threat last year might not necessarily be the threat you're facing the following year. Have you seen that sort of within your world, Lee?
Yeah, very much so. And obviously what we've been experiencing, together over the last sort of 15 to 18 months has really kind of put that into perspective. You know, the way that these sort of scam emails were being positioned, you know, the way that you know, and I call it sort of the human vulnerability. You know, everybody personally is susceptible, you know, to scams, to people trying to defraud them, to, you know, people trying to steal your credit card details, to those, you know, those calls from BT trying to get you to transfer them some money when it's not actually BT. You know, those types of things. You know, we saw a really significant change when COVID hit, because suddenly people are more vulnerable. You know, people are more open and susceptible. You know, and they were really playing on that fear factor. So what we were doing is we were having to constantly, you know, track some of the methods and ways, and, you know, text messages that were going out, and, you know, you were able to, you know, they were sending text messages out saying, you know, to claim VAT back as part of a government scheme. Well, actually, you know, that wasn't the way that the government was allowing you to claim that back, but it was a very, you know, it was a very important thing, and, you know, to do with when people were going on furlough, you know, again, preying on exactly the types of things that you're worried about as a business owner, and that your staff are worried about, and that your family might be worried about. So, you know, the challenges there is, what are these very latest scams? And they were changing day by day, week by week. So it's no good telling somebody one thing one year and then doing something another year, because not only is it changing, but also people are forgetting about it. You know, people don't just take it in. You know, it might be security stuff. You know, people aren't generally interested in security stuff. You know, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in work and home life that they are interested in instead. So it's really about continually drip feeding important information. And certainly as COVID hit, we had a mantra, which was safe at home, safe at work. And what we're actually doing is we're actually, you know, working with our colleagues across the business, because actually it's the same principles that apply in home security and security with your kids using the internet, as you apply a lot of those same principles at work. So yeah, so it's about working with people in their own language, and you know, trying not to be technical, but actually keeping track of the latest things, and a constant drip feed out there, which is what we try and do, which is, you know, at Dominoes, which is what we try and do at the FCCRC, you know, which what we'd strongly advise you to do, you know, with your staff as well.
Thanks, Lee. Just come back to that point in terms of, you know, that need to continue to train staff. And the reason I come back to that is certainly what we've seen, and what you know, statistics will show, is that actually in terms of the turnover of staff, notwithstanding COVID, and we know we see the headlines that hospitality and retail, food sectors are really struggling to recruit, but those sectors themselves actually do see a continual quite high turnover of staff in terms of longevity once they sort of join, you know, the traditional sort of image of the university student working in a bar of an evening of a weekend. So there is that corporate memory requirement in terms of actually making sure that this is being constantly sort of fed through that workforce, because, you know, the people that you trained last year might not even be the people that are working in that establishment in the following year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with our franchisees quite closely. You know, they fairly high turnover of Dominoes delivery staff. You know, we have a few that stick around for an unusually long amount of time. But again, yeah, we have the same problem, and another reason why it's very important to constantly drip feed. Absolutely. So
in the last year, it's reported that we've got, or rather since, just over the year, so since March of 2020, there's been an additional 60,000, just shy of 60,500 new businesses launched across the southeast region. And in the same sort of report, it was saying that 98% of UK businesses now have operationally online in one way or the other, you know, benefiting hugely from use of websites, social media, staff email addresses, online banking, and of course the ability for customers to shop, etc., online. You know, Dominoes, as we've discussed before, Lee, is a sort of like a a metaphor for all of that in one sort of soundbite, isn't it? Because you are a massive retailer, but you do a lot of your work online. What can small businesses do or rather, what do small businesses need to be aware of in terms of their online persona, do you think?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. It's becoming very easy to start up websites. I remember back in the days 10 years ago, you know, to get a website to do any sort of, e-commerce related activity, actually pretty tricky. You needed a strong partner, you needed some good skills, and you need a lot of maintenance. Whereas these days, it's very, very different. I think in terms of the online persona, it's a few things really. I think it's about making sure that the system that you're using or the partner that you're using to deliver that system really understands what the security elements to that are, especially if you're taking credit card details. There are the payment card industry data security standards that are out there. So if you are taking payment card, any sort of form of credit card payments or debit card payments, you need to be aware of that primarily. And you need to be in compliance to that. And they've got some fairly good kind of basic data security standards. If depending on the volume of cards that you're taking, will depend on how in depth you need to be. We're very much at the top level of that, and it's a very onerous exercise for us to do every year. But we are responsible for an awful lot of credit card transactions and millions of people's worth of card details. So we treat it incredibly importantly. I mean, it's something we put a lot of priority and time and effort into getting right. But at a very basic level, I think that's a good place to be. And cyber essentials as well would be something that I tend to point people in the direction of, because that's just about the very basics. It's about keeping software up to date. It's about patching. It's about managing passwords effectively. It's about making sure that that at a very basic level with any laptops or desktops that you have, that you've got an appropriate level of sort of malware protection. So you have the right sort of antivirus programs to be able to proactively defend yourselves against that level of or against a good level of threats and malware and ransomware. So there's a lot of really good data out there between those two guides to help you.
Thanks. Sort of just following on from sort of that and that sort of that soundbite of the growth across the southeast, Claire, just from your perspective, are you seeing, or is insurance seeing an increase in relation to companies approaching insurance companies seeking cyber insurance?
Yes. I think originally cyber was seen as a risk for banks and financial sort of industry companies. They were the main targets. And I think once they kind of wisened up to the risks and started to defend against them, then the criminals looked elsewhere, and I think the retail market is where they landed, because they might not be as aware, they might not have the money to plug into the defence that the big banks and the financial institutions have. So they're kind of seen as an easier target, which is why we have seen more customers being more receptive to cyber than we have done previously. As I said earlier, people's main concern is a third party coming into their shop or business or whatever, falling over, making a claim against them. But that's just one type of insurance. That's just one type of risk. There's lots of other risks that retailers face these days. Cyber insurance, certainly one of them. And I think it's something that business owners have come to look at as another form of risk management. So we go on and on about risk management all the time in a more physical sense of, are you making sure you've got proper signage, you've got fire protection, you've trained your staff how to lift boxes, etc., etc. But nowadays, you've also got to train your staff in how to change their passwords, manage their passwords, what to do if they see a suspicious-looking email, and it's just all sort of building that risk management for the company as a whole now, both from sort of board director level right down to the people that are on the shop floor or behind the customer service desks, so that everyone's aware of what they need to do to mitigate the risks.
Yeah, no, that's really good points there. And I think, as you said, in terms of, has retail and the food sector become a little bit of a soft target, because other sectors have really sort of upped their game, and as you said, sort of finance. We're seeing lots in the press recently about targeting of educational sectors in relation to sort of ransomware attacks and schools being taken off of line, and we all know the impact that COVID has had on children and their education over the year, and and nobody wants to have their children off school any more than they have over the last year. God forbid that the little darlings being back at home, but actually their education is really important, isn't it? So we want to make sure that they are actually in school and learning. So just sort of in respect of that, and to some of the points that Lee made there, is there any thought within insurance about what mechanisms may be appropriate to help make cyber insurance maybe more affordable or more appealing to companies? And I'll offer a really, hopefully not too sort of blunt but simple example. So if you're doing a quote for your car insurance and you get asked the questions, has it got a tracker, has it got an alarm, etc., if you say no, that's going to probably push your premium up a little bit. Is there anything within the insurance sector that they're saying, really we want you to have this as a minimum sort of level of understanding?
Yeah, of course. If you go to a cyber insurer for a quote and they say, what have you got in place to mitigate the risk of a cyber attack, and you say nothing, then your premiums are going to be an awful lot more expensive than if you can say, well, yes, we regularly train our staff. We've got multi-factor authentication. We've got a sort of clear desk policy. All sort of sensitive customer information is shredded daily, and everything's super secure and efficient. Then and a cyber insurer is going to rate that risk a lot more competitively than if you have nothing at all. Obviously, some things, some material facts, you're not going to be able to do a lot about. So, do you hold a lot of sensitive data electronically? Well, if you do, you do. You can't do much about that. But proving what you've got in place that's regularly reviewed and updated in accordance with current legislation, then insurers are going to look upon the risk a lot more favourably.
Could I ask, does Cyber Essentials certification and Cyber Essentials Plus certification, does that feature anywhere within the sort of insurance sort of mindset in relation to premiums and stuff like that?
It wouldn't be something that would be on a standard proposal form, as in a question, do you have it? But as a broker, if we were trying to get a quote from an insurer and we said, look, our client has got this, then that would certainly go in favour as a real positive risk feature for that client, and they would more than likely get a preferential rate because of it.
And forgive the plug, but what about membership of the Cyber Resilience Centre? And not just obviously for the South East, but this is a network of centres across the whole of the UK. So is that anything that's sort of been considered in terms of a company showing that they're a member of a cyber resilience centre in their local region, and whether or not that has an influencing sort of impact?
Yeah, definitely, because it shows that commitment to the ongoing training and reviewing of procedures of the company and their staff. So, yeah, definitely, it shows, as I said before, like keeping up to date with risk management, health and safety legislation that will secure you a discount on your public liability premiums and your employer's liability premiums, keeping up to date with cyber. And sort of making sure that your defence is as robust as it can possibly be by, being a part of an organisation such as yours, then that's definitely going to go in your favour when getting a cyber insurance quotation.
I'm glad you said that, because at least we can be of some value. But it's just it's for us, our main focus is about education and awareness, and the ability to actually take people on a journey, for want of a better phrase, to actually keep them by membership, to keep them updated in terms of what this current threat. And I think, as we mentioned in our sort of pre-recording, preamble, in terms of releasing of our podcasts and the literature that we push out to our membership. Just want to come back to this point around personal data, because I think, as both Lee and Claire, you've both made mention of, as the retail sector will generate a huge amount of personal data just by its very nature. If you've got God knows how many covers in a restaurant each day, how many people of those, notwithstanding COVID, are paying by card as opposed to cash, and all the details. You should show shopping online. As I said, 98% of UK businesses now have a functioning operational online sort of presence. So, and I think, Claire, it was you that made mention of it before. There is, of course, there's two aspects to this, isn't it? If you get a data breach, there's the operational impact in terms of if your system goes down. In fact, an additional one, there's a reputational aspect in terms of if your system gets compromised in the release of data. But of course, there's also that threat from the Information Commissioner's Office in relation to having not taken measures to mitigate that sort of loss. And Chris, I'm just going to sort of bring you in, because I think, where does that feature? Where does Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus feature in the IOC's sort of thinking?
So they break it down into security control areas. When we look at the people within an organisation, you train them to keep the organisation safe, because they're often your first and last line of defence. So when they rock up at your organisation, you tell them about company policy, and within that, you should have a risk register that talks about how your cyber security is dealt with. So you train them in cyber security. Yes, you'd like to see that done within their first month of joining, but we appreciate time is precious and that's not always achievable. But certainly the Information Commissioner's Office also recommends that onboarding training should take place within the first 2 months, and refresher training programs should be in place which tackle cybersecurity annually. So it's all about keeping your first and last line of defence safe and secure, and that is your staff. And then some of the other control mechanisms which Cyber Essentials talks about is looking at the processes, which is all your different policies you have in respect of keeping the computer safe and how they're configured, and the technology, which is keeping the bad people out and the good stuff in.
Thanks. How much, Lee, of your time, and I know you made reference to it earlier about it's a massive area of focus and importance for you, how much of your time is sort of preoccupied with that sort of worry or thought processes around it, that sort of data management?
Yeah, so data management, I think, is something that's quite often overlooked. We understand, that, say an antivirus program on a laptop will keep a laptop safe, but I think every organisation struggles with this. Is where is the data, and what data do you care about? And it's a program that everybody really goes through, or should certainly be thinking about. We have a lot of third parties these days. We have a lot of laptops. Data isn't just back 30 years ago. It's not just in the central place. It's everywhere now. It's on mobile devices. It's on laptops. So what's really important when we think about it from a data perspective, especially thinking about personally identifiable information and some of the legal requirements that every organization has now, is where is that data, who's got it, and who's got access to it, and then thinking about, we're not trying to do all of the security controls to everything that we've got. It isn't about that. And I think, as Claire talked about earlier, and as we're moving into, cyber is a business risk, and we need to be treating risk appropriately. So we really need to understand it first and foremost before we can do anything about it. There's a certain amount of basics that we can put in place, and Cyber Essentials is it's a great start, and PCI is a compliance requirement from a credit card processing perspective. Again, there's some minimum things that we can do, but do we know where our data is? And I think that's key to really understanding that. And do we know where our personal identifiable information is? We're processing a whole lot of data, but then being able to understand that and being able to put better security controls around the data that we really care about and around the systems that we really care about versus what we don't. And again, it's really a business risk, right? This isn't an IT thing. It's a business risk. If we get hit by a cyber attack and it takes our business down, it stops us trading. It stops us being able to supply pizzas. It stops us from being able to manufacture dough. This is all hitting our business. So how does that work? If we have shops go down because of a ransomware attack, it's a business impact. So I think it's really important, fundamentally, that we think about it in those terms. And therefore, we need to understand what is really important to our business. What do we really care about, and what could we potentially do without? So, payroll systems. If we have a payroll system goes down, people don't get paid, but we've maybe got time to fix it, and we can maybe work with people to find other ways to pay them. But actually, if our credit card processing systems go down, we can't take, we stop as a business. We can't take revenue. If our website goes down, we have a lot of business goes to our website. So we need to understand what's important and what isn't, would be my primary advice, along with what data is important and what data isn't.
Yeah, no, that's some really good points. And I suppose going back to that, but again, without wishing to roll out the figures again, but with 98% of companies having that online presence now, I think that figure has significantly increased over COVID. And certainly if we look at the food and retail sector, how many shops, I mean, even if you take your local public house, who suddenly moved to actually being able to order food for collection online. We've seen a massive increase in the revenues of Deliveroo and Just Eat and other those bits and pieces. Obviously other food delivery services are available, but that sort of growth in terms of being able to take an opportunity that wasn't there before and maximize it. And we've seen a lot of people that have started up businesses in their home and delivering stuff through various online sort of auction sites. And that point about a risk register or understanding that risk is crucial. But I suppose, playing devil's advocate, if you're a very small micro business, very small SME, you may not be operating potentially in that sort of mindset. But I suppose it's the principles, isn't it? It's about, even if you're the smallest fish and chip shop, in a high street, you're going to be mindful that if your deep fat fryer catches on fire, you've got a bit of a critical business risk to your livelihood.
Yeah. So,
but equally, and this is a point that the Cyber Resilience Centre really tries to sort of labour a lot, is if you are doing anything online, you may be in the business of frying fish for somebody's Friday fish and chip supper, but you are a cyber business because you are probably ordering online, you're probably advertising online, you're probably using your online bank account to pay your customers, to pay your suppliers, to pay your staff. So all of those aspects that you sort of raised, Lee, can equally be relatable to any size of business, can't they?
Yeah, very much so. Having a website is having a website. And having a website is also a beacon for somebody to potentially stumble across it, scan and understand that actually there are some security weaknesses and there's some holes in the website, and then come in and do some damage to your business. So yeah, it's all really the same principles apply across the board. It's about very much so.
And it's, we're talking about, certainly in the food and retail sector, we're talking about a lot of money each year going through people's tills or online shops. Certainly in the UK between 2009 and 2021, statistics will show that the average UK household spend was £1,700 a year on just takeaway food. Hopefully not all in one sitting, but that is a lot of money when you amplify that across every household across the UK. I mean, I know you made reference to the sort of revenues that Dominoes make, but it's the same principles. Claire, from your perspective, then, in terms of in cyber insurance, what would you be advocating to, as a broker? What would your conversation be with a new company that's phoning you up saying, "I want to speak to you about cyber insurance"?
So we would obviously be urging them to buy cyber insurance, because I think all companies these days should have it. Because the risks are there, whether they're big or small, they're still there. And I think small businesses are probably more vulnerable than the large ones, because they don't really have the financial capital or backup to survive a cyber attack. And I think one of the main issues that we also ask our customers to think about is what they would do if a cyber attack occurred. Realistically, what would you do? How would you, deal with a ransomware request, for example? What would you do if your system was completely locked down? You were a hairdresser, for example, and you couldn't access who had an appointment when, and everything just descended into chaos. You have to have that sort of backup plan in place and have it tested, so that it would work if you did encounter such an attack. It's all these sorts of discussions that we're having with our customers, whether they want cyber insurance or not. We'll talk to them about it, because as insurers, it's our job to make people aware, and if they want to accept their own risk on some things, then that's their choice, but at least we've told them about it.
That's a really good question, if I could just sort of interject there. So just out of interest, whether or not you could be able to say this, how many people come to you actually specifically asking for cyber insurance, or is it a case of they come to you for other types of business related insurance and you sort of introduce the concept of cyber insurance?
Yeah, no one comes to us for cyber insurance unless they've had a cyber attack.
So that sort of, forgive the pun, but after the horse has bolted, somebody sort of then says, "Oh," and then, by which time it's already too late, and probably their premium will be quite high because they've already had the. Because
they've had something, yeah. Unfortunately, yes, and sometimes people think that when they buy commercial business insurance, it covers them for everything, and it doesn't. So our job is to look at what they've got and sort of have frank discussions with them about so what if this happened, and what if this happened, what would you do? And then just by talking to them in that way, you can kind of sort of tweak out the potential gaps in cover. And cyber's normally a gap in cover. It's not an insurance that many of our customers have. So we're constantly trying to sell it, because it's a very real threat.
No, that's a really interesting point. I think that's been a really interesting conversation we've had this afternoon. Lots of really, really helpful and insightful points raised. Chris, I'm going to turn to you then for a sort of last segment, because without wishing to blow the centre's own trumpet, we are here to provide a service to the SMEs and the wider business community and other sort of organisation. So, but based on the points that Lee and Claire have sort of relayed to us this afternoon, what is it the Cyber Resilience Centre for the South East, and indeed all of the cyber resilience centres across the country, what can we actually do to help businesses in this area?
So we offer services. We've got 9 services which are offered across the whole country. So all of the 9 cyber resilience centres can do the same thing. I think today's discussion broken it down into the 3 key areas of people. So we can offer security awareness training, because I know that the smaller the business, you have to outsource certain things because you don't have departments that can deliver on your company objectives. So security awareness training, we can deliver that where it's just teaching staff on how to use their computers positively and ethically and keeping themselves safe. We then look at the technology. So we can do some vulnerability scanning. So that's, I guess, in the eyes of the hacker, looking at your company from the outside and highlighting what the weaknesses are and where there's exploitation points. So that's vulnerability assessments. We've got 3 types of these vulnerability assessments. So looking from the outside in, then we can look at internal vulnerabilities. And if you're big enough to have your own web apps, we can look at those as well for weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And then lastly, looking at your processes. So you may not be in a position where you have cyber on your risk register. You may not be aware of all of the assets. So that's anything from your mobile devices to your laptops, to your router switches, etc., even your websites. There should be a policy in place that people can follow so that they know what good looks like, they know what safe looks like. So we can help you out with the review of your security policies. And additionally, when it all goes wrong, business continuity policies. So having that plan B. I know most businesses out there will have fire and flood and first aid all covered off because we're comfortable with that. But in this new world of cyber, if you go to work one day and the computers just simply don't turn on, or unfortunately you could be subject of an incident, having a good plan B. There will be some disruption, but it's to try and minimise that, often referred to as like disaster recovery. See how quick you can get back up on your feet and back to normality. So those are the different services that realistically the cyber resilience centres and the network across the country can help your business, no matter how small or large. We can help you at an affordable rate.
I hope this has been helpful to anybody who's been listening to us. And please continue to subscribe and continue to listen to our podcasts. And if you are a business in your SME, if you haven't joined the South East Cyber Resilience Centre, then please visit our website where you can sign up for our free call membership. Thank you very much and good afternoon.